How's it going, everyone? We are back in the world of Lords of the Fallen, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you my spellsword infernal build. This is a mid-game build that takes advantage of infernal based weapons and skills to create the ultimate blazing warrior. We take advantage of seismic slam, which deals incredible AOE damage, but also if angled correctly it can shotgun enemies, dealing insane damage for a single cast. As a warrior, we take advantage of the Fallen Lord sword, which is a grand sword that cleave enemies down. It also has a pretty insane ignite stat, which does AOE fire damage on top of its already really solid damage. Because we have great mana sustain, we have the ability to keep our defense resistance permanently buffed with Adir's hardiness, and with infernal weapon we continue to have increased weapon damage should you need it. This is a powerful mid-game build that I thoroughly enjoy, so let me show you how to build it. Alright, starting off, while this is a mid to end game build, in the event that you are playing this as a new character, we're going to go over the character selection, and you have two options that you could go with. First being the Pyrotic Cultist, mainly because he has really good infernal stats and pretty decent endurance stats. As you can probably tell on the right side, it says he is an advanced class, and it is a bit of a rough start in my opinion, mainly because his weapon really sucks and he does scale off of fire, and a lot of the early game mobs tend to have pretty good fire resistance. Mana sustain isn't necessarily the best, and you don't start off with the best armor to physical resistance. With that said, when it comes to best stats, the Pyrotic Cultist is by far the best for this build. Now alternatively, and if I'm being honest, if I was to play this again, I would go with the Hollowed Knight. The main thing being that he actually starts with pretty good stats all around. He has really good endurance, since the secondary stat we're going to be using in this build is going to be an endurance base, and his early game is just much easier since you have a shield, a good sword, really good armor. Overall you can deal pretty good damage without being so locked into fire damage, and that's really important. With that said, this is going to be the decision you want to make. If you want to be more efficient with your stats, go with the Pyrotic Cultist. If you want to have an easier early game, go with the Hollowed Knight. Continuing on, let's go over the gear. Now starting off, we're going to go with the weapon, and that is the Fallen Lord sword. You will get this in lower Calrath. I'll have it on screen where it's located, and this is going to be your bread and butter. This is one of the best swords I think in the game. Really good scaling on Inferno, 3 Inferno runes, one of the best basic night chances, pretty much everything you would want from a Inferno based build. Now over to the runes, and this is going to be interchangeable based on what you want. This is just what I use and I feel it's comfortable. But you want a thermal rune. This is going to give you pretty good health sustain. You don't take that much damage because this build is actually fairly defensive, and being able to like kill and get a little bit of extra health actually helps you with sustain, so you're not popping too many of your heals. So for the second rune, you can either get the Arnikos like I have, or the Burlam rune. Either of these work. The most important thing is to scale the Inferno. When I tested, I still have the same scaling. I don't know if one gives more than the other. You'll probably have to check that, but whenever I have either slotted, I have the same exact scaling, so either one of these work fine. Now on to our next slot, we have a shield. Now, and that's for a very specific reason, and I want to give you guys a little bit of understanding of how shields and stuff work in it. If you slot something into your offhand weapon, you get the benefits of that said thing regardless of if you actually have it out or using it. So as you can see, I have it on my back, and that's purely because this is a radiance based shield, and radiance based shields have access to a rune that you've probably seen in my other rune, video, the Nartron rune, and this one gives me a small amount of mana regeneration. And then we have the Hoslin rune, which will give us increased vitality, extra health, extra mana, and all it costs us is a little bit of weight. This thing weighs a total of 2.8 weight, and you get this shield at the very beginning of the game. I'll have it playing on screen now, but this is why we're using it. We're using it purely because we want some mana sustain. Just keep in mind, all the rest of the stuff that gives us mana sustain, you don't have to use it, but you won't be able to spam as much spells if you do go this route. So for our catalyst, we have the Searing Accusation. You can get this from the Tortured Prisoner. If you're not familiar with the Tortured Prisoner, this is the Skyrest. This is the place directly across from it. She will spawn exactly here, and if you do the quest or do the little thing you need to get her, you can just get it from here. So just do that. It's a very short thing, just Google it. Just know you will have to give the Tortured Prisoner the Eye of the Giant in order for this to become available in the shop. So after defeating the giant, you'll basically get access to this. It's a pretty good catalyst. It's not the best scaling catalyst, to my understanding it's the second best, but the best is actually in the end game, and obviously, you know, we're not there as a mid game build, right? So Searing Accusation, you get this really early, and I think it's the second best one, and it's really damn good. So going over the spells, we use Magma Surge. This one's interchangeable. I don't think this one's important. I use it because it has pretty decent for like zoning enemies that stand still, but this one's interchangeable. You get it from killing the giant and bring his remembrance to Malu. Seismic Slam, this is from the Tortured Prisoner. The Infernal Weapon is from this Shrine of Adair here. You get it right at this spot. Just keep in mind, it'll be exactly right here where I'm attacking. Just keep in mind that the team recently changed this location. So if you didn't get this like in the first couple of days from here, it may be there for you now. So just keep that in mind. They did change the location. Then there's Adair's Hardiness. This is one of your bread and butter spells. It just gives you defense and resistances. And it's a pretty sizable buff. It's a shout sorcery. I think it's very underrated. It gives you a lot. And then I just chain that with this, and as soon as my flame buff goes away, I just recast the defense buff, and they're usually like fairly close in terms of like cast time, but yeah, it's really nice synergy. Now for our armors, we're using the Pyrotic Cultist Hood. I like the way it looks, and I can't afford any weight, so that's what we're using. We have the Sovereign Protector armor, the gauntlets, as well as the legs. It just gives really good general stats. You can go heavier if you can afford the weight, but just keep in mind this build is very heavy, mainly because our weapon is super heavy, and that's why our stats, if you notice, has just as much endurance as we have Inferno, which is mainly because of the weight. If you're a higher level like 80, you'll probably stop at probably 35ish and then put the rest in Inferno. But yeah, this is a very heavy build. With that in mind, let's go over the accessories. And we have the Rogar's Delight. This is purchased from the Tortured Prisoner as well. Increases fire damage and fire defense. So again, it's very important to get the Tortured Prisoner because she does all the fire stuff. We have the Mana Stone Ring. This is again from the Tortured Prisoner. I believe Joe Hammer Gaming has a guide on how to do it. It's very quick. I'll have it on screen as well as down linked in the description if you want to go check it out, how to get this. But this is like very important to the build if you want to spam spells more than you want to attack, because you can do that. You can be more attack focused or spell focused. It kind of depends on what you want to do, but this one is kind of interchangeable. You can change to other things. I used the Ring of Bones, but if you want to go with a lighter armor set, you can afford to take the Ring of Bones off and have a lighter armor but have something else here. Some options that you can have: Ring of Night Fire, that one's pretty good as it gives fire damage and wither. Alternatively, you can get the ring that gives you posture, or you can get the ring that gives you whenever you ignite something, they burn. I'll show it on the screen because I don't actually have it to this playthrough, but that one's kind of a pain to get because you have to like save Winterberry down in the like underworld area, so that's a big pain. But this is kind of a slot you can, both of these slots are slightly interchangeable if you value not having as much mana, right? So just keep that in mind. Now, one thing I did want to mention before we move on is you should have the enhanced Bloody Hatchet. This is actually pretty important if you're going with the Pyrotic Cultist early on, because you actually have a little bit of a hard time with, you know, physical damage, because some bosses actually are resistant to fire early. More specifically, the big giant guy, he is very resistant to fire, but you can just throw Bloody Hatchets at him and it'll kill him relatively easy. I think when I did it, I finished a whole satchel and like 3 of the smaller satchels to kill him. It wasn't that many considering, you know, you get so many souls back, so it doesn't really matter. And where it spawns is here. This is right outside of the guy, the bell guy you fight in the bell room door. He like smacks his head, and then it'll be sitting, I believe, exactly right here, like somewhere around here. And then there's like 2 shards on the other side there for upgrade, so make sure you grab that. That's where this is at. Before we move on, one thing I did want to mention, because I did forget to record this in the other section: if you don't want to use the mana ring, just know that you will be able to generally sustain using both your buff and the defense buff from the shout, because you have enough mana sustain by the time the actual buff like expires, but just don't expect to be spamming this ability as much whenever you're actively playing, because you know it costs too much mana if you drop the mana stone ring and only use the shield thing. But I think the shield thing should be sustainable for the buffs and the stuff alone, so just keep that in mind. Alright, on to the stats, and for the stats it's pretty simple. We have 10 in strength, 10 in agility. The reason why we have 10 in these is purely because we wanted to use the bloody hatchet and it required 10-10, that's it. For the endurance, we need a lot of endurance. This is just as heavy endurance as it is Inferno. Once you get to about 35, I think I said this earlier, but once you get to like 35-40, you're probably good on endurance, or if you use a lighter armor set, then you should be fine on endurance. But if you want to go with a heavier armor set, you're gonna need endurance up to like 35-ish. Vitality, I use 26 vitality. Is it being increased because I had that in my shield? That gives me some increased vitality, which is really nice. But yeah, keep that in mind. You actually get some pretty decent stuff from just having that shield on. It's really good. I have 8 in radiance. That's just enough to be able to equip this shield that I have, which is good. And this is how the piratic cultists start off, with a base of 8, so you actually be able to use this shield and get your mana and your extra health. Really nice synergy. 35 in Inferno. Obviously we're going to scale this up higher as we transition this into more of an in-game build, but yeah, definitely this is the stat spread I would, and it's pretty simple. You just pump endurance, pump Inferno, and get your vitality to a comfortable number. And there you have it, guys. That is my mid-game Inferno build. This build is relatively strong. If you position yourself really well, you get a lot of benefit out of your hammer, as well as just general AOE clear is just amazing. Obviously the only negative is it is a fire-based build, so it does have a little bit of a hard time versus fire-based enemies until you transition it into an in-game build. With that said, I really appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget to like as well as subscribe for more Lords of the Fallen content, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.